This episode is brought to you by Bleacher Report. How do you follow sports? From college football to the NBA, Bleacher Report brings you the latest news, live scores, and epic highlights from your favorite leagues, teams, and athletes, all in one app. Dive into exclusive shows hosted by your favorite athletes and original Bleacher Report series with breaking news, rumors, and predictions all season long. Download Bleacher Report to personalize your coverage.
This episode is brought to you by Honda. When you test drive the all-electric Prologue SUV, there's a lot that could impress you about it. There's the generous passenger space, the clean, thoughtful design, and the intuitive technology. But out of everything, what you'll really love most is that it's a Honda. Visit honda.com/EV to see offers.
Hey, it's Bill Simmons from the Bill Simmons Podcast here to tell you about Michelob Ultra Courtside. It's getting fans closer to the NBA with a chance to win prizes like courtside seats, a trip to All-Star Weekend, and much more. Check it out at MichelobUltra.com/courtside. Michelob Ultra Superior Access, Courtside 24-25 sweepstakes, no purchase necessary. Open to U.S. residents 21 and up. Begins on October 1st, 2024, ends July 1st, 2025. Multiple entry periods. Visit MichelobUltra.com/courtside for free entry deadlines, and official rules. Message and data rates may apply. Void where prohibited.
Hello and welcome to the Paddock and the Pavilion. I'm Stephen Wallace and this is a special Christmas Eve edition. Joining me for the Scudamores at Christmas is former leading national hunt jockey and now racing broadcaster Tom Scudamore. In this festive episode, Tom reflects on growing up in the Scudamore family during his father Peter's legendary career, his own riding exploits over the Christmas period and his transition to life as a broadcaster. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you for your support throughout the year. It truly means so much to me. So settle in and enjoy the Scudamores at Christmas with Tom Scudamore. Welcome to the Paddock and the Pavilion, Tom, to talk about Christmas with the Scudamores.
Thank you very much for inviting me on.
And also a special thanks to David Hunter at the Clerk of the Course at Fakenham Racecourse, who reliably told me that that was where you rode your last winner.
Yes, it was a couple of years ago. It was a lot of success around Fakenham, and very pleased that my last winner happened to be there.
So that was number 1499 then.
Yeah, 1499 over jumps in the UK and Ireland. I also had a winner in France and had a winner in Germany as well, and then another, I think 14 or 15 on the flat as well. So we try and round it up a bit. So
so you can claim 1500 then.
I can claim 1500. Yeah, 1499 doesn't sound so good, but all in all, I rode about 1500 and I don't know 13 or 14 winners. So it was quite a few.
Let's get on to the subject of Christmas then. What's your earliest memory of racing at Christmas time?
My earliest memory of racing at Christmas time, for those of a certain age, would revolve around Desert Orchid. He's the first horse I remember at Christmas time. I remember it must have been 1988 when he won a 4 or 5 run at King George. I remember that very vividly. On the Boxing Day, I don't think Dad was there that day. He was at Newton Abbot or something like that, and I'd have been 4 at the time, and just getting 4 or 5 at the time, just getting to my racing, and I just remember. I remember watching that day's racing and Desert Orchid. I think Bill beating Charter Party and Bugcatini and those pretty as he was expected to do. So that would have been my first Christmas memory of racing.
So can you remember Dad winning the Welsh National on Carville's Hill then in 1991?
I remember it very vividly. Actually, as I was saying that, I remember him winning then the Welsh National 2 days later on Bonanza Boy, and again the year after. Year after that, I think he broke his leg, so that wasn't such a happy memory. I remember Carville's Hill absolutely routing them. So basically, Dad won it. He won it 4 times in all, but I certainly remember 3 of them very clearly.
So was he not about very much over Christmas then?
He was about more over Christmas than most of the time. It was very different back then. We wouldn't see much of him during the week, and especially I was brought up in the Cotswolds, and funny enough, where Nigel Twiston Davis trains now is where we used to live. So a lot of the time, Dad would have been, away first thing and back pretty late at night. So you might have got after school. I suppose he'd come back at 6, 7 o'clock. So we'd get an hour with him or so then. But he'd be gone first thing in the morning, especially if he was riding out at Martin Pipes or in Lambourne or somewhere. Every now and again, you might get a bit of time with him in the morning. But so I remember him. So that he'd have 3 or 4 days off over Christmas. So Christmas was always a good time, and fortunately, because he had good horses to ride, he didn't have to worry too much about his weight over Christmas as well. So he could get stuck into the food and wine. So I remember Christmas very vividly with Dad being there.
And what about Grandad Michael? Was he there as well?
Not at that stage. Grandad lived in Hereford, but he moved to the Cotswolds after Dad retired. So from my teenage years, then obviously Grandad was a massive integral part, but he must have come over. They must have spent some Christmases together. But then having said that, when Dad was riding, Grandad had a yard of his own in Hereford. So he probably in reality couldn't get away from that. So he had horses to look after and whatnot over Christmas. So I can't really remember an awful lot of my Grandad over Christmas other than maybe seeing him at Chepstow on Welsh National Day.
He also won the King George, like yourself. I mean, he won the National and the Gold Cup, but I didn't realise until checking up a few minutes before this Zoom call that when he won your Grandad won the King George, the horse that came second that day was Devon Lock in 1956.
That's right. So he won the King George and the Gold Cup then in the same season. He used to love talking about the King George for various different reasons. The first reason, I think they delayed it for a day because of snow, and his brother dragged him out and took him by tractor to the Gloucester train station, and he caught the train to Sunbury, and won the King George on an outside of Peter Caslett. Who obviously also trained the much more fancy Devon Lock, who was second. But he won it on a horse called Rose Park, who was an out-and-out 2-miler. And he always, supposedly it was one of the rides of the decade. It was an outsider, and he basically went to fence clear and they couldn't catch him. So he liked talking about the King George for various different reasons. Obviously, the fact that he won it, but obviously the travails it took him a day and a half to get there and a day and a half to get back. But whether that was just an excuse to Granny for going out in London.
And he stopped a royal winner with Dick Francis.
Yeah, he did, on the stable second string. So he probably wasn't that popular.
Just going back to watching on the television, Dad retired at 1993, I think. Did you then find yourself watching him on the television at Christmas?
Yeah, but again, BBC at the time, they had Ascot and they had Chepstow. Channel 4 had Kempton. So Dad would be away. We'd go to Ascot on the Saturday for the big meeting before Kempton, and then Boxing Day, so Dad at the time was an assistant to Nigel Twiston-Davies as well as being on the telly. So the majority of Boxing Days was spent either at Wincanton or Huntingdon or one of the other meetings there, and then going to Chepstow for Welsh National Day, which was generally what we would do. So yeah, it was always, understandably, whatever way you look at it, we were racing.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous 2-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
This episode is brought to you by United Airlines. When you want to make the most of your vacation, book with United. They're an airline that cares about your travels as much as you do. United is transforming the flying experience with Bluetooth connectivity, screens, power at every seat, and bigger overhead bins to help fit everyone's bag. And with their app, you can skip the bag check line, get live updates, and more. Change the way you fly. Book your next trip today at united.com.
This episode is brought to you by AWS. Amazon Q Business is the new generative AI assistant from AWS. Many tasks can make business slow, like wading through mud. Help! Luckily, there's a faster, easier, less messy choice. Amazon Q can securely understand your business data to help you streamline tasks, like summarizing quarterly results or doing complex analyses in no time. Q got this. Learn what Amazon Q Business can do for you at aws.com/learn more.
Moving on to your riding, I'm guessing your first riding at Christmas was 1998?
No, I was still at, so 1998, I don't think I rode that Boxing Day. I don't think I'd ridden enough winners. I was still riding as an amateur. I don't think I had a ride. So the first year when I was sort of 16, I didn't have many rides, had a couple of winners and not many rides. But the next year it really took off. So the first one I remember riding would have been at Hereford, I think, on Boxing Day. And the reason I remember that is because I had to claim off a weight and I had under 10 stone. So I had spinach soup at Christmas time. So I remember that pretty vividly. And I think, even to make matters worse as well, I think Boxing Day was on a Monday, and back then you didn't race on the Sunday, so after Christmas. So you'd have Christmas Day, a day off, and then Boxing Day would be then put back a day. I think that's right. I'm saying right in saying that. But anyway, I just remember the first Christmas being very hungry and looking at everybody else eating their Christmas and thinking, well, I'm going to have to get used to this for the next few years. I wasn't expecting to have to get used to it for the next 20, but there we go.
Is that true? You had to sort of, Christmas Day was always quite a light lunch, was it?
No, not really. It was to begin with, but then I got my weight under control, and I thought I'm better off trying to eat a balanced diet than what I was trying to do when I was a teenager. So no, I was always pretty lucky. I could have Christmas lunch and things like that. So although I didn't used to go mad, but I could, I wouldn't miss much either.
Now, your most memorable day at Christmas must have been the King George win in 2016 on Thistlecrack. How optimistic were you for him as a novice? It's only his fourth ride over fences of winning the King George.
I'd like to say I thought it was a certainty, but the week before, so you obviously got the King George, and then you've got the Grade 1 novice chase there as well. And we had a meeting, I remember, at Wincanton Racecourse after the last, where John Snook, Thistlecrack's owner, Colin Tizard, who trained Thistlecrack, myself, and Joe Tizard, who was the assistant to Colin at the time, all had a chat about it, and myself and Joe got outvoted for the King George. We both went for the Feltham, trying to play it safe, where he'd have been about 10-1 on. But John Snook said fortune favours the brave, and we went for the King George, and I'm very pleased that they did go for it. I think what probably swung it was that morning we'd schooled him, and they put the fences up, and Richard Johnson would normally ride Native River. This is after Native River had just won the Hennessy, and they were getting him ready for the Welsh National, and he schooled upsides Thistlecrack. And Richard Johnson, at the time, myself, Richard Johnson and Paddy Brennan were riding the majority of Colin Tizard's horses, and for whatever reason, Richard Johnson wasn't in, although he very rarely sort of rode out at Collins, to be fair. And Paddy was schooling Native River, and I schooled Thistlecrack. And Paddy, he was going to ride Q Card in the King George, so he was sort of Thistlecrack's main rival. And we went like the clappers. Paddy tried to put me under all sorts of pressure, schooling, going a crazy gallop, and Thistlecrack had him for breakfast. So I think that was then the decision was made that he was ready for that sort of challenge, and they were proven right.
He gave you a dream ride that day, didn't he?
Yeah, very straightforward, really. Good start, slipped in behind Silvaniaco Conti, took it up with the circuit to go, and was able to wave at the crowd halfway up the run. And it was, as Grandad would say, kept a leg either side and his head off the floor, and he did the rest.
That was his best day, Thistlecrack?
Yeah, it was. Unfortunately, his career was marred by injury after that. But for the 18 months before that, starting when he won the long distance hurdle at Newbury. And then that season he won another 3 or 4 Grade Ones and staying 3 Grade Ones and staying hurdles. And then he went over fences and won his first 4 over fences. But unfortunately, his next run, he picked up an injury behind many clouds when we were just touched off. He picked up a leg injury that day. And although he still was able to compete at a high level, he was never the same horse again, really.
Yeah, although he did still come fourth and second in future King George's. So
yeah, but he was operating at 70% of what he could do before, which shows you the talent that he had.
Must be a regret to you that he'd got injured, because he could have done so much more.
Look, I was just very privileged to be able to ride him. It's a sense of what could have been, but it's not a sense of frustration, or it's not something you really dwell upon, because you can only deal with what is thrown at you. And fortunately, I had the pleasure of riding him for 18 months. So yeah, it was unfortunately picked up an injury, but that's also the nature of sport at the same time. And I suppose the only real regret, I suppose, is not, it is one for him that in his prime, although he's a very popular horse, he put up great performances. He was a very good horse. Potentially he could have been a great horse, but injury stopped him from reaching those sort of levels. So that's the only sort of sad thing about it, is that perhaps if he'd had a slightly clearer run, he'd have gone down as one of the great horses. But there's lots of jockeys that could say that about lots of horses. But the reason why the Desert Orchids and Corto Stars and Best Mates, Sprinter Sacras are spoken of in such glowing terms, because they can do it time and time again, and that's basically the sign of a great horse. There's lots of very good horses. There's very good horses that put up great performance, but there's very few great horses.
What about the Welsh Grand National? You didn't win it, but did you come close? No, father won it 4 times.
Yeah, the Welsh National is one that got away. I had a few rides in it. I never actually had a really good ride in the race. I suppose the best, I was fourth, beaten a few lengths on Monbeg Dude. I was trying to jump the second last upsides on an outsider one day. But other than that, my record in the Welsh National was pretty hopeless, really, which is again something that was growing up. It was my favourite race because Dad won it 4 times, so I loved it. Granddad had obviously won it as a jockey, and my brother won it as a trainer as well. So I do feel left out when it comes to the Welsh National, and it's a great race. It's one of the great races, but unfortunately, it wasn't to be. I won lots of races on Welsh National Day, just unfortunately not the race itself.
Now it's working on TV. Do you miss the riding on or over the Christmas period?
Oh yeah, I miss riding every single day, but I'm very much at peace with the fact that I can't do it again. But yeah, of course, you miss absolutely everything involved with riding racehorses, and it does make you realise how fortunate I had been all through my career that I was able to do something I loved so much. But miss it. Miss it's the wrong word. I wish I could go and do it all over again, but I don't miss it. I don't have any regrets, or you can only live with the moment, and that's a chapter that's closed. And I don't really, I think if I sat down and felt sorry for myself and wish that I was still riding, then it's not going to help anybody.
You can now eat and drink what you like over Christmas, though.
It looks that way. I'm a bit heavier than I was before. Yeah, and I won't miss anything. I won't miss. I've never been a great fan of Christmas pudding, mind, but fortunately, my mother-in-law will make lots of canapes and stuff beforehand, so I certainly won't miss any champagne, any wine, or if there's any leftovers afterwards, I'll be having everything.
But you'll still be studying the form like you did when you were riding.
Oh yeah, but that's those meetings. It's straightforward to study the form because they're all such good horses, and you know what's running, and you've watched them all anyway. So yeah, if you've done enough homework all through the year, you don't have to worry too much the day before. You should have done. It's the same as revising for an exam. If you're trying to cram it in the last couple of days, then you've messed up. You're not doing it right.
Well, you should know, because I think you were still studying when you were riding, weren't you?
Yes, yeah. I was still at school when I first started riding as an amateur. So Yeah, the last year I was meant to be doing my A-levels, so I spent most of my time on a race course. So that's my excuse for the results I achieved anyway.
But you enjoy working on television, and did you always think you would do? I know you retired suddenly.
Yeah, I always thought it was something that I thought I'd like to do, and when I was riding, I was getting offers, and you can never assume anything, as the famous saying goes. But it was something that I was always interested in, something I always did when I was riding. And even, I suppose, the fact that my grandfather retired through injury. He had a very bad fall in 1966 where he was lucky not to be killed, but he basically smashed his face in, lost the sight in one eye, and had to put a cage over his face for about the next 8 months, and was eating liquid food. And so as he always said, it ruined his good looks. But so that finished off his riding career. So he was very conscious that both my father and myself were fully aware, not only the dangers, of course, come anyway, but that of having something to back up the riding, because very few people get to choose when to retire. So you had to have other interests, other business ventures, everything else to be interested in, because at some point either the doctor, you get the sack, or if you're in a very fortunate position, you get to say thank you very much, and you've got something to move on to straight away. So that was one of the mantras of both my father and myself's riding career, is that we had other things going on as well, so that everything could be as seamless as possible. Because no matter how successful you are, however wonderful you might think you are, life goes on very quickly, and you have to have something to move seamlessly into. So yeah, television was something I always wanted to do, but as I said, I didn't just assume that would happen. I had other interests as well.
And where will you be over the festive period? We're recording here on the 10th of December.
I am Ascot on the long walk hurdle day. So that's the Saturday before Christmas. I'm then at Sky Sports on the Welsh Grand National Day. And then I'm back with ITV on Challow Hurdle Day, which is just before New Year's Eve. So that's about the 30th. So busy Christmas period, and then plenty of racing with Sky Sports and ITV over the new year as well. So it's a busy time with lots of wonderful racing ahead.
Well, enjoy Christmas. You can enjoy the food and the drink this year. Thank you very much for joining me on the Paddock and the Pavilion, sharing Christmas with the Scudamores.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
When you're part of a military family, you understand sacrifice and support. So at American Public University, we honor your dedication by extending our military tuition savings to your extended family. Parents, spouses, legal partners, siblings, and dependents all qualify for APU's preferred military rate of just $250 per credit hour for undergraduate and master's level programs. American Public University. Value for the whole family. Learn more at apu.apus.edu/military.